Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Sara, TheHypeGoblin, and this week I'll be doing a Dungeon Master Roundtable. A few nights ago, I sat down to talk with Fred from How to D&D.
Hi, I'm Fred Wheeler, and I run the How to D&D YouTube channel. You can find me on Twitch, and I don't really use Twitch, but I use Twitter and I use Facebook, and I apparently have a Discord where you can actually talk to me.
Taron from Indestructoboy.
Hey, I'm Taron, Indestructoboy Pounds. I do a lot of game design focused stuff over on my channel. I am the designer of the Merchant, Dancer, and Runekeeper classes over on the Dungeon Masters Guild. I'm also a musician and music educator. So yeah, come check my channel out if you're into homebrew design, you wanna kind of up your game and make your own character options for D&D, come hang out.
And Jordan from Flutes.
I'm Jordan. I'm with Flutes. You can call me Flutes. Flutes started out as a website blog that my wife and I made. She goes by Opal, and we just wrote about anything D&D we felt like. It really was just a blog, and then it grew, and now we made a YouTube channel. But she has a gift for making formulas for magic items, and she has a great article and video about how to craft them. So if you're ever wondering how to make magic item crafting more interesting, definitely go to her video or join our Patreon to get on our Discord and get unlimited access to us. That's us. Check us out.
So without further ado, let's go ahead and roll that intro and get on with the questions. With rumors of and some confirmed details of future updates for the franchise to 5.5, which we've already talked about a little bit, do you think the incremental updates are more accessible for DMs and players than if Wizards of the Coast had released a full 6E update with all new books and all new mechanics?
They're going in the more consumer-friendly route right here. I mean, I just had this discussion on a live stream not super long ago. Actually, I think it might have been 2 days ago. I think that based on what Ray Winninger said, if everything's going to be backwards compatible, and like I already own the player's handbook, maybe they'll release an update to some of the races. That's the most consumer friendly thing. You don't even have to buy the product. I mean, you have to buy the newer stuff that's coming out for it, but like, I mean, if the newer stuff is just new character options or we're repurposing the way that some certain things work, I'd be kind of fine with it. And like, honestly, as somebody that's so used to like selling PDFs, and I'm kind of thankful that I have that cushion of, if I need to find something I need to errata, I don't have a million books out there that are in print with a mistake. I'm now saying they're not valid anymore, guys. No, I can just change the PDF and release like, hey, changelog, here you go, click. And so if they go with like a more digital format, I know that some people are so upset with that idea, but like, I honestly think that it's probably the smarter move in terms of like how much easier the system would be to design for, because I've experienced that before. I can't fix something that's in print.
Yeah.
Even an errata, I don't know of how many players out there are really keeping up with like, well, here's my errata, I'm going to print that and keep that in the book as well as everything else. I mean, or if you're crazy like me and own like, 10 copies of the player's handbook in separate printings, then whatever. But I think that if they go with this idea of, I don't know what this new format is, I don't have any like insider knowledge or anything, but if they go with a more D&D Beyond or like, let's say Roll20 style route, where, because we already know they have a virtual tabletop under the way, so for them not to bring all that kind of stuff in-house, I think they're missing out. I think Roll20 is eventually going to become only Pathfinder, Call of Cthulhu, that kind of stuff, and D&D is just going to be D&D Beyond X plus Knuckles, right? Like it's going to be the new big cheese. So like, I think that they're actually going in a pretty consumer friendly route here. If I'm really thinking about this in terms of like the business practices, if all this stuff is backwards compatible, which is like the thing we keep complaining to Microsoft and Sony about their consoles right? Like, if backwards compatibility isn't going to be a thing in the edition, and they're like, hey, I know we just released like 3 books this year, but next year we have the brand new system, I'd raise my eyebrow at that over we're possibly adopting a new format for edition releases.
I feel like I feel like a whole new 6E system would feel like a cash grab because it is so super popular now and everyone is going out and buying the books and everyone is trying to learn D&D. I feel like if they were to release a full 6E update on the market, it looks like, oh, there's suddenly new interest. Oh, we know how to make some more money. Let's release 6E now. Like I think it's really consumer friendly the way they're going. And as someone like I have a whole shelf. I have 2 full shelves of TTRPGs behind me. A lot of red markers on those labels. But even as someone who owns a lot of printed material, just because I like the nostalgia factor of books.
Yeah.
I primarily use D&D Beyond. It's I get my answer in seconds rather than, pulling out the book and flipping through all the pages and then looking for what I need. So, yeah,
it's the best tool for homebrew design as well. I mean, next to a thesaurus, okay? I have my thesaurus and then I've got D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond lets me immediately, go to the rules. The fact that Wizards of the Coast won't put up PDFs means that's where I've got to get some of the content I'm going to copy over or reference, right? Like I could flip through a book here and reference this, go type over here, reference this, go type, whatever. Or I can just go over to D&D Beyond and copy paste. Like, that factor alone makes it to where I'm like, it has saved me hours of work, but also it's just so quick to sort through. I know there's other websites that have tried, but I don't think anything's as graceful as D&D Beyond is at getting you the information. Now they need to fix their search bar. Bob Worldbuilder had a hilarious video on their search bar, which Curse or whoever owns D&D Beyond right now, that needs to be your top priority. Okay. But the tool is great. I think some of the complaints people have had about, well, I'm rebuying a book on here, WotC seems to have understood that, because I don't know if any of y'all have bought a starter edition or a starter set or expansion set lately, but it comes with a QR code.
They're coming with them now?
They at least the ones that I just bought for the tabletop games class I taught.
Nice.
So it seems to be a thing. And I know it's kind of the popular opinion. I mean, I even do it myself to knock WotC on some of the practices that are going on. The 5.5e thing is the thing that I'm like, I think they're making the right business step here. I think they are. Unless we hear something like it's going all NFT, then I think this is going to be fine.
I think I see things a little differently. I completely agree, though, that the backwards compatible is what I want. That's smart. But kind of these slow rollouts when we know the big stuff's coming up in a few years, I actually feel myself putting up a question mark about what's coming out lately. And a lot of the feedback I've seen about Mordekainen's Monsters of the Multiverse is that it is just not great in expanding my toolkit as a DM from what I already have. And so to me, that feels like a cash grab where they're kind of trying to do some revamps along the way and just kind of milk a little bit of money out of people. And maybe it's not that way. Maybe they are just doing it because of new players. Like you said, they don't have erratas taped into their players' handbooks. Like you said, that's irritating. But I think it's a combination. I think in some ways it's just more books that you have to reference instead of it just coming out in one bigger book later. I think by definition, I think that's less accessible, especially because they're not doing PDFs. But though, by the way, you can get some PDFs without getting a computer virus. I can send you one. I guess that's my thought. I agree wholeheartedly that they're doing it smart for their business, and they're doing a lot of good things for consumers with the backwards compatible. But some of the content they're doing, in the slow rollouts until 2024, have me kind of raising an eyebrow. I don't know.
I guess my thing right now, I like this idea of, I mean, I'm not sure really what they're going to update to the system right now. My big critiques are let's make the mechanics for light and dark actually something that we need. We're going to feel an incentive to track. you know, more than just like these hyper specific rules about, well, you're obscured, so go reference the obscured section. I reference this. That means I have, so I need to go check out this other mechanic, you know. Fleshing out environmental stuff is where I think like system could use some help. Probably taking some of the power out of dodge, I think might be something we'll see. I can't help but think that Monk is going to start out with a D6, and Stunning Strike we're most likely going to see changed in some form. They're going to get a free disengagement tool. Straight up, Monk is going to get, I will promise you this, Monk is not going to be the same class in 5.5e. I'll put $20 on it right now to all three of you. Monk is going to start out with a D6 damage die with their martial arts thing. It's going to scale up to probably a D10. I don't think that they're going to go all D12 on it yet, or do the double damage die thing. I saw Tree at Monk's fix, and I can appreciate what he's going for there. But like, I think we've just learned some stuff in the system, and like, I worry about, based off of what you said, the question mark. Hey, you watch my videos. You know I've raised plenty of complaints about Tasha's. I think they need to build their design team out a little bit more. Well, I guess Tasha's came out before Amanda Harmon, right? If I'm remembering that right. So Amanda Harmon came over from Starfinder, Paizo, all that stuff. I think she actually created Starfinder. So they have someone on the team that is like, okay, you have built a system for a working good system. And that's not saying 5e is not a working good system. I'm just saying, I think that the design team that worked on Tasha's could use a little bit more reinforcement before tackling something as big as creating an entirely new system. Because things like Twilight Cleric can't exist in the future stuff. It's
so OP.
They can't exist.
So OP.
It's the most optimal character option to possibly take right now. There is no argument about it. Literally every YouTuber that is an optimizer, designer, or just, dungeon dudes over there talking about whatever they want to talk about, unanimously, I think they're in their survey, Twilight Domain was like 70% favored, and then the next one up was Peace Domain with 25% favored. So it's like, and yeah, I can see either or. At certain tables, if you have a character with a race that gives you flight and you're taking Peace Domain, like there's some potential there for that thing to go way out of control real quick. But yeah, Twilight Domain is like, we might see, if I can remember right, we might see one of the only subclasses in a future errata that actually gets a feature removed.
They need to remove the aura.
The Twilight Sanctuary, I very much see getting completely removed.
I have a funny story about the Twilight Sanctuary. So, one of my very, very good friends is a power gamer, and he decided to run a D&D game for us. Normally, he's just the player that comes in and just smashes the monster and combat's over. So I decided to be the smartass who created the glass cannon, and I created a bard, and she thought that she could fight, and she had a negative constitution modifier, so she had like a third of the HP she should have had the entire campaign. The only reason she survived is because of that aura. Every time she would hit 0, that temp HP at the end of her round would kick in, and she'd survive. I never made a single death roll. I was expecting her to be dead like the second combat we went to. Like, I built her that she was going to not survive, and that was fine. I had another character waiting in the wings. But gosh darn it, that Twilight Cleric kept me up. It's OP. So OP.
A Twilight Cleric at second level, well, really, as soon as you get that thing, if that aura is up, and this is what I'm thinking about it, like, as a designer, this is effectively making the offensive CR of every monster 2, if not 3, if not 4 ranks lower than what it says in their stat block, because you are essentially, the temp HP dishing out is like you are removing their potential damage output every round. That's what it is. The regeneration is just that good. And something that is that amazing of an offensive feature to just dish out that many temporary hit points should be reserved behind, like, I'm talking Paladin, Capstone, like, that needs to be, I don't think we're going to see that. If they announce that they're going to do a print version of Tasha's with some changes, I'm real curious. I'm gonna put my money on it. I think Twilight Domain we're gonna see reworked hardcore. Yeah.
What about you, Fred? You look like you have something turning.
I do. I want to make it clear now for anybody who's watching Sara's channel that these are not Sara's opinions.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
You are not going to like what I have to say.
It was a good run on YouTube. I will see you all next week. It sounds like I'm about to get canceled.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would.
Here we go. The only reason that we are looking at a Dungeons & Dragons Evolved is because in 2024, it's the 50th anniversary. It's money. The only reason for doing that is to cash in. It's also to sort of, okay, let's celebrate we're 50 years of Dungeons & Dragons has been alive and well and so forth. But it's money. That's really what we're talking about. And to make it clear, this is not the first time that we have had incremental updates and changes. Now, Jordan knows this because I put him through hell when he had to do all the research for the history of Dungeons & Dragons and who created it. And so there was a lot of stuff he had to wade his way through. So a lot of people think there's like maybe 5 or 6 versions of Dungeons & Dragons official games, but there's like 12. And out of those 12, they all had often had an incremental change or adjustment, like a 0.5 or a 0.3 or a 7.5 or a 0.9 or something in there. So it's been going on from the get-go. And every time you have an incremental rule adjustment, which tends to be a product of trying to advance the game to a certain degree, but it's also about money. Because, if there's any kind of a look like that it's slowing down, then we need to change it up to get more new people into the game. That's the reality. It's always split the community. It's going to split the community now. It split the community when we went from version 3 to 3.5. It split the community when we went from 3.5 to 4. It did it right back in basic and then into advanced Dungeons & Dragons, first ed edition and second ed edition. It has always been a bad thing. And it is essentially Wizards of the Coast is doing exactly what TSR did. They're trying to make money. That's it. Now, given that you're probably going to have rule adjustments and changes over time. That's just a natural process. Well, how do you do it so you don't annoy your community so they stop buying your products? Well, Wizards of the Coast is not really very good at that. Because now every book that they put out, one part of the book has to be for players, right? One part of the book has to be for dungeon masters generally. Apart from maybe the adventure books, right? But even the adventure books are trying to put player stuff in there. So every player who buys these books gets a small amount of stuff or part of what they wanted, and the rest of the book they feel like they spent full price and the rest of it's useless to them. Dungeon masters who didn't really want to buy all the player options are having the same issue going on. So they've split it deliberately by the marketing process. And now they're going to make it worse by the incremental process. Again, Monsters of the Multiverse was supposed to be, let's showcase what we're going to do in the future and the advancement of our monster stat blocks and our playable character races, okay, or lineages or species or whatever the heck we're calling them now. The monsters are, I can't use any of that stuff because they didn't make enough changes. Like what they did with them was like pointless. You're going to add 15 hit points to a character, a monster that's level 18, challenge rating 18.
Yeah.
Like, what is 15 hit points going to do? All my monsters are running at max hit points to deal with my experienced group. And even they struggle to survive. Damage output. Did it really increase? I don't think so. Did they change damage resistance that much? Well, in some of the monsters, they eliminated the ability for a magic item to supersede damage resistance. And some of the monsters lost the damage resistance to bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing. Look, it all looks to me like Dungeons and Dragons 4E, frankly. And if you're new into the game, you won't care. You won't even notice it. But if you've been playing the game a little while, I can see a lot of people being very, very unhappy. If I had a choice between buying the updates for Monsters of the Multiverse and buying the Tomb of Beasts 2 by Kobold Press, I'm going to buy the Tomb of Beasts by Kobold Press. Now, to give you an idea, I'm in New Zealand. It is going to cost me to get through the book depository, free shipping that is, probably about $112 New Zealand. Okay? Yeah.
I've got it too.
All new monsters, right?
Yep.
I buy this thing, it's probably going to cost me about $62 when they drop in price on the book depository. And frankly, I've got more stuff. There's maps, there's lairs, there's better lore, and the monsters really haven't changed that much in Volo's Guide to Monsters and Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. So I'm better with those two books than I am with grabbing this new thing. So unfortunately, I feel like it's a part of the natural process of a game design that there are going to be changes. But Wizards of the Coast is really trying too hard to actually capture money. And the only reason that Monsters of the Multiverse is released in 2022 is because they weren't able to release it in 2021 before Christmas because of the pandemic. They couldn't ship it, they couldn't get it printed fast enough. It was a money grab. That's really all it was, okay? You put a fancy title on it. You don't have to change anything in the books for two of them. And then there's one book where we pretty much transfer everything over, make a few adjustments, and get some more art. That's it. So I'm not very impressed. I think a lot of people will be very unimpressed. And they run the risk, and I don't want this to happen. They run the risk of splintering the community, and with us finding a lot of people either not playing Dungeons and Dragons, which is something I don't want to happen, or going and playing a different system, which is not necessarily going to suit them or satisfy them either. So yeah, I'm a little concerned by the way they're approaching this, frankly.
Do you think, with the history of these shorter increments in their back catalog, do you think there's a better way to keep interest without doing these things that are constant money pushers? Like, would something better maybe look like when new content rolls out, there's a player book and a DM book, and they're smaller and less expensive total, but they can be purchased separate?
So traditionally, the market has not responded well to books that are made specifically for dungeon masters and then who are made specifically for players. The market doesn't like that. And you talk about backward compatible. So all of the adventures now, really, that Wizards of the Coast put out are backward compatible. I would actually argue that many of the adventures from basic Dungeons and Dragons are forward compatible, which means they're backward compatible as well. If they can go forward, they go backward. Yeah,
you future-proof it. Yep.
You really don't need to. You do not need to worry about the system, because the adventure itself is written in such a way that the core mechanics of the game, which is your strength, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, charisma, and constitution, those checks are there. Okay. In terms of dice rolling and monsters, it's just about changing the types of stat blocks for monsters that is going to change over time for sure. Absolutely. So I think the best way they could have done a book like Monsters of the Multiverse is they should have put all new monsters in it.
Yep.
All new monsters. Don't mess anybody around. Don't put player character races in there. Don't do that. Because you don't need to. Do you know why you don't need to? Because if you want players to buy a monster manual, it's actually not that difficult. They actually don't mind buying it in the slightest. You know why they don't mind buying it? Because polymorph exists. True polymorph exists. There are people who play druids. Okay? People play druids. That means they're going to want to transform into a monster. Do you really think that the dungeon master, while they're running their game, is going to let the player have their monster manual when they're trying to run their monsters? No, go buy your own. Thank you very much. Okay, so they're going to buy this. If you got anybody who's using familiars, bam, you have a whole lot of things in that monster manual that are familiars, all new. If you want to play a Beastmaster Ranger, and if you do, well done. I know it's a hard push considering what you have to deal with, but if you've got animal companions or even sidekicks that you've modified over, there you go, Monsters of the Multiverse. You just need to have lots of beasts, things that will tie in. You want to summon something? Well, guess what? There are a lot of spells that require summoning. What are you going to use? You're going to summon a Earth Elemental. Well, you need the Monster Manual or a Monster Book to actually do that. So a monster book is easy to market to players and dungeon masters as long as you have enough things in there that players are going to use. And frankly, I think I've just explained that it's actually not that difficult to do.
I think you just outlined Pokemon.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
It's a great idea, though. But yeah.
I don't personally like Pokemon, but the simple fact is that not everybody's got 4 or 5 players, and if you're running a small group, it makes perfect sense to have animal companions or beasts of burden that can help you in battle, or an ally who might be a beast or a creature or a monster. You know, we've got our buddy, the Ooze. He takes the front line. Okay, I mean, whatever it is that you've got, maybe you decide that Droop from the Lost Mine of Fendelver needs to be one of the NPCs who's going to play along with you because you've only got 2 players. And Droop, for some reason, I don't know, maybe he's figured out how to cast spells. I don't imagine him being in the front line personally. So you can build books around that. They just haven't been doing that. It's not like it hasn't been done before. They're actually doing all the same things that Wizards of the Coast is doing, all the things that TSR did. They're going right back to where they were, and it's unfortunate.
They're also trying to incorporate Magic the Gathering and that sort of thing. But it just goes to like they just need to stop getting shown up by third parties. Like we were all just like, yeah, Tome of Beast 2, you know, but Wizards of the Coast could have done that, you know.
Well, I think, Fred, you might have just given WotC a great reason to legitimize or, you know, make an official monster tamer class. You know, the fact of, you know, you brought up a great point, though, because, like, whenever I was working on my why Wizard needs a buff video, because I knew that was going to require some research, I had sent over my, I guess, thesis, my script, whatever you can say, to Heavy Arms, Complete Armorer's Handbook, and I mean, great designer. And he was like, you know, the thing is, like, Wizards' power budget in general gets made a little bit like weaker every single time they keep expanding out character options that get access to spells that are on the Wizard spell list. Because, like, if you're making it to where that incredible versatility of Wizard is kind of spread out amongst other people and they don't really have exclusive spells anymore, and Bard exists and is a full caster, well, that means that, like, spell list exclusivity isn't really like a factor of its power. So, you know, every time that they release new books or, like, you know, Strixhaven, where it includes a bunch of new spells, we actually see something like Wizards' power budget actually does increase a little bit. So then, like, I guess you could say that, yeah, now player characters need to go grab that because Silvery Barbs is in the game. And, you know, I swear I'm not going to talk about that spell anymore. But, like, it's a good point that Fred made about, like, players do have an incentive to pick up monster manuals because, like, there is a reason why they wanted to, like, print the beasts in the player's handbook at the end because they want the druid to get, like, you know, here's a cat and it doesn't have dark vision, but whatever. it dies when it falls 10 feet, which whatever. But your palette of what you can access as a character gets more expansive if you do pick up the monster manual. You know, some of the options, shape change, that spell. If all you can access is the stuff that's in the player's handbook, you just wasted a 9th level spell, man. You're gonna want to reference. You know, you're gonna pick up that spell. Go get the player's handbook, or go get the monster manual. You know, like, I've got that stat block here, right? Like, yeah, I think that also another kind of addition to Fred's point earlier, the distribution of material, what's player facing, DM facing, and all that stuff. I did the research on this like 2 years ago. This is back before Tasha's and some of the other adventures and stuff. And it's like the distribution of what is player facing or DM facing or like campaign setting building is so random in 5e. It stays pretty consistent. Player's handbook, pretty clearly player option stuff in there. DM's guide is actually surprisingly something of a mix because the rules for crafting are in there and like environmental conditions and things like that for whatever reason they didn't just copy paste over into the player's handbook. And then some magic items that you could argue the artificer needs to know are only in the DMG. But, you know, monster manual, pretty clearly all just monsters, right? But then you start going into Tasha's and it's like, in this chapter is for the DM, and then you flip 2 pages. This section right here is for the players. You flip back over here. Here's the classes for the players. But like, Tasha's is real bad about this. It has gotten worse over time, where the distribution of mixed materials like this is just scatterbrained, absolutely scatterbrained. And I think that going forward, like this is a critique of mine, they should really emphasize on 5e is not a very favorable to the DM system. They need to make the guy with the hardest job, guy or gal, you know, or whatever you identify as, at the table. Whoever has the hardest job at that table needs to be set up with the best tools to run the game. And 5e is not the system that sets you up with the easiest tools to run this game. So it needs to be more DM friendly. This is something that not only like I said, but like everyone in the design sphere I talked to. Benjamin Huffman was the first guy that I remember saying something straight up. 5e is just not a great system for DMs. Like, yeah. So you got a point. I'll side with you there. You got a point.
I need to make a confession to you, Fred, because 4 or 5 years ago, WotC put out a survey, and I think I solely am responsible for the way they've done their business lately, because they say, are you a player or a DM? And I said, oh, I'm both. And they said, what makes you want to buy books of these lists? And I was like, new subclasses? Yeah, I want that. New art? Yeah, I want that. And new spells? Yeah, I want that. And now like all their books have like a little sprinkling of that stuff. And then twofold, it's my fault because I have a website and I write about subclasses and feats a lot. And when they release that stuff, I have to write about it. So I have to go, oh, do I have to buy the book just for that? Do I have to buy Fizzbands just for 2 subclasses so I can incorporate it in all my articles, going backlog about all the monks and rangers? So I'm sorry, Fred. I've fed the monster. I'm partially to blame.
Single-handedly influencing a major corporation. I'm glad that you're taking the responsibility for your actions. That's the first step in affecting change.